Hey, what's up everyone? This is MusicTechHelpGuy, and in this video, I'm going to demonstrate all of the new features in iZotope Ozone 11, which was just released. And then after I show you all of the new features, I'll give you a quick demonstration of some mastering examples in Ozone with a few different tracks. This video is going to be pretty long, so if you want to jump around in the video and see just the features you're most interested in, I've left chapters in the video and in the video description below. I'll be using Ozone 11 Advanced for this video, so if you want to see a list of specific features and modules included in each different version of Ozone, go check out iZotope's website for more details. Now, one last thing I'll mention, because Ozone is a mastering plugin, is that some of the audio levels in this video will be pretty loud, others will be very soft, specifically when I solo certain elements. So just note that I'm not making any adjustments to the audio signal in post in this video. I'm not compensating for volume at all. You're hearing the audio exactly as it sounds coming out of Ozone. But for the maximizer examples where the volume will be really, really loud, I'll turn on the gain match and/or I'll give you a heads up when the loud volume examples are coming in so that you don't blow your ears. All right, so let's get into this. Let's check out Ozone 11 Advanced. Okay, so up first is the new Clarity module. The Clarity module adaptively maximizes the track's spectral energy, resulting in a polished and professional sound. This is great for rescuing muddy or dull mixes, and this mainly acts on the high end. So what you can do is you can boost the amount of the clarity. This brings out the top end detail, and then you can use this filter here to band limit the effect starting at 300 hertz all the way up to 20,000 hertz. So before I use the Clarity module, let me play you a little bit of the track I'm using here. This first track is just an electronic track I'm working on. It's just an instrumental. It's fully mixed, but the master is maybe a little dull sounding for electronic music. So let me play a little bit without the Clarity module in, then I'll pull this in and pull up the amount and play around with some of the parameters. So yeah, it's really opening up the top end. It's really bringing out the detail. Again, this is all electronic music. These are all synthesizers. So I want to hear all of that percussiveness, all of that detail. So the amount just controls the amount of the clarity effect. Again, you can band limit it here starting at 300 hertz. So if you want to affect more of just the top end, you can pull this up in the higher end. Or what you can do is leave it at 300 and you can adjust the tilt. So the tilt will give more high frequency emphasis to the right and more of like a mid-range frequency emphasis to the left. And then in addition to that, you can adjust the attack and release of the effect. So it's got its own built-in envelope. If you want to hear the Clarity module affecting the transients less, you can pull down the attack. If you want more of the transient to be affected by the Clarity module, you can pull it up, and you can do the same thing for the release. So that's the clarity module. This is one of my favorite new features in Ozone 11. It's the only new module in Ozone 11, but there are plenty of other features I'm going to show you. But up next is the Delta button. Now, I'm going to be demonstrating the Delta button throughout this video, but Delta buttons have been added to every single module in Ozone 11. So what the Delta buttons do is these allow you to hear exactly how each module is affecting your audio. So this monitors the difference between the input and processed signal. So if you click on this, you're just hearing the processing without the input signal. You know, maybe I want to saturate the mid-range a bit. Maybe I'll add the exciter plugin here. Let's add a little bit of triode type saturation to the bottom end. Let's warm up the mid-range. I'll do the same thing. I'll use the triode. And then for the top end, I'm going to get rid of that, and we'll just use 3 bands. Let's use the tape saturation for the top end. And again, because all of the modules in Ozone 11 have the Delta button, you can monitor how that individual module is affecting the signal. So here's with the full exciter effect in with the input signal. And then just the exciter. I know a lot of people disagree with me on this point, but I really like to hear elements of a mix or even a master be isolated, because I'm able to sort of wrap my brain around what the plugin or what the module is doing. So I'm really happy that they've added these Delta buttons in all of the modules, so I can hear specifically what each module is doing to the signal, and I'm not just moving things around and not quite hearing it in the mix. Stem focus is another really awesome new feature. What this does is it allows you to apply any of the Ozone modules to the full mix, just the isolated vocals, just the isolated drums, or just the isolated bass. So this uses AI to sort of source separate the vocals, drums, and bass in real time, and then you can apply modules only to that stem. This is especially helpful if you have a mix where the mix is not quite ready for mastering. Maybe, you know, the mixing engineer had the vocals a little too dull or a little too bright, or maybe the transients aren't quite popping in the drums. You can do some corrective things to the mix before jumping into mastering. Now, one thing I will mention here is when you use the stem focus options up here, this applies to all of the modules that are inside of Ozone. So if you want to apply something, say, to just the drums, and then you want to go ahead and master the song, you're going to have to use 2 different Ozone modules. And that's totally fine, but that's just the way it works. Whatever you select here, that will be the only thing that's processed in all of the modules in Ozone 11. There's no way to separate it by module. So I've got another track here. This song is called Lessons. This is from an artist named Lexandra. It's sort of like a blend of electronic pop and metal, so it's pretty unique. Go check her out on her brand new YouTube channel, where she's posted a new music video for the song, and she has 2 other upcoming music videos that I also mixed and mastered as well. And so I just want to give her a big thanks for allowing me to use this track for this demonstration. So one of the things in this mix is, I think the vocals are maybe a bit thin, so maybe let's try to add some body to just the vocals. Let's give this a listen as is.
I see these people collecting friends, money, and stuff. I know that living's a blessing, so I'll make that enough.
got a nice vocal character, but I maybe want a little more top end, a bit more like mid-range presence, and definitely a bit more bottom end. So what I can do is I can add any module I want. Maybe I'll add the dynamics module, or not the dynamics module. Let's add the dynamic EQ module. And then what I can do is I can click on the vocal stem here, and any of the changes I make to this module will only be applied to the vocals.
I see these people collecting friends, money, and stuff. I know that living's a blessing, so I'll make that enough. But I feel that I'm miles behind everyone else at the end of the day. I can't seem to get one single thing right, no matter how hard I pray.
Now, one of the things I like about using the stem focus is the delta buttons come in really handy here, because when you select the delta button, you're only going to hear what's being processed, right, within the module, but you're also only going to hear the processing on that specific stem. So clicking the delta button will also isolate the stem processing for each module.
I see these people collecting friends, money, and stuff. I know that living's a blessing, so I'll make that enough. But I feel that I'm miles behind everyone else at the end of the day. I can't seem to get one single thing right, no matter how hard I pray. I need a reason to stay, to not just fade away. 'Cause if the flame goes out.
Or maybe I wanted to fatten up the drums. I could select the drum stem, and this time I'll go ahead and add the EQ to this. And what I want to do here is I want to try to isolate the frequency of the kick and snare and beef up the drums, because the drums sound maybe a little on the thin side. They're punchy enough, but they're not thick enough. So what I'm going to do is just add a couple of bands here. And then with this on the drum stem, with delta in, I'm going to just sort of isolate the frequency range of the kick and the snare. And I'm going to go ahead and move to another section where the drums are more prevalent here, just in the chorus. So I've added a bit of a boost, and this is only affecting the drums.
Reason to stay, to not just fade away. 'Cause if the flame goes out in my soul, what is there left to say? I need a reason to stay, to not just fade away. 'Cause if the flame goes out in my soul, what is there left to say? I need.
So here I'm adding a bit of a boost to the low end for the kick, a bit of a mid-range boost to the snare, and a bit of a top mid-range here, just for a bit of a crispiness, just a little more thwack in the drums. One other thing I just want to remind you of is when you use stem focus, a lot of these changes are going to seem fairly minimal unless you're really cranking the settings. If you just want to make the vocals or the drums or the bass louder, that's actually much easier than using the stem focus mode. You just use the master rebalance module. But when you're using stem focus, you cannot use master rebalance. So what you have to do is put this on full mix, and then you can select master rebalance. And so if all you're trying to do is just make the vocals louder or make the bass louder or make the drums louder, there's no need to use the stem focus. This is only if you want to apply specific processing to one stem and not to the rest of the song. Another new addition that's really helpful is the transient sustain mode. And this is in most of the modules. Previously, you could separate the processing of most of the modules in stereo, mid-side, or left-right, but now there's a new transient sustain mode that's been added. So what this does is this separates the transients from the sustain, and you can apply different processing to your transients than the sustain. So for example, I've got another track here. This is called Pieces from Restless, Lioness. This is another track I mixed and mastered. It's available on all streaming platforms. And let's say that I want to add a bit more top end to the transients because in this track, the drums seem a little muted. Let's listen to just a bit of this here.
Why are we in pieces? In pieces. In pieces. Why are we in?
So if you solo the transient module, you'll only hear the transients. If I click on sustain here and solo the sustain, I'll only hear the sustain.
Why are we in pieces?
So what I can do is on the transients, maybe what I'll do is I'll bring up the top end a bit.
Why are we in pieces? In pieces.
And then on the sustain, maybe I'll bring up the body a bit.
Why are we in pieces? In pieces. In pieces. Why are we in pieces? In pieces. In pieces. Why are we in pieces? In pieces. In pieces. Why are we in pieces?
So I'm able to accentuate the transients and really give the drums a bit more thwack without, bringing up the ringing of the cymbals too much, without bringing up too much of the vocals. So this allows you to separate the transient material from the sustained material and process it separately. And this is not, again, this is not just for the EQ. This works for just about all of the modules in Ozone 11. There is a transient sustain mode for just about all of these. Ozone 11 also has a new assistive vocal balance feature, but in order to use this feature, you have to use the Master Assistant. It's not a module that you can add manually. It's something that's just baked into the Master Assistant. So if you're not familiar with the Master Assistant, you just click Master Assistant and then you play back the loudest portion of your song. So I'm going to play back the lessons track here, and then I'll show you the vocal check or vocal balance check feature.
Is in the state to not just fade away. 'Cause if the flame goes out in my soul, what is there left to say? I need a
Okay, just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to pull the maximizer off so we don't get a bunch of added loudness there. But when you go back to the Master Assistant section, you'll see there's a vocal balance module here. And if you see a little purple check, it means that your vocal level was fine. There was no additional balance that was needed. So, and really the way this works is this is tied to the Master Rebalance module. So if your song needs to have the vocals pulled down or pulled up, what Ozone will automatically do is it will add the Master Rebalance module into the signal chain here. It actually does it first. And then you'll see the adjustment made over here, and you can turn it on or off. So I think if I run, well, this one's an instrumental, but these two, if I run it on both of them, it's just going to tell me that my vocals are fine. But what I'll do is I'll trick this. I'll trick it into believing that it's low. So I'm going to load Ozone on the track itself. I'm going to throw the Master Assistant on there, or Master Rebalance on there. Let's pull the vocals down by like 5 dB or so. So now, like when I listen to this, the vocals are definitely going to be too low.
is in the state to not just fade away.
Yeah, so she's getting buried under the instruments there. So let's add Ozone 11 on the master, and I'm going to run the Master Assistant one more time.
Is in the state
Okay, let's go ahead and pull out the the maximizer again. But what you'll see is in the Master Assistant, it's added a bit of gain to the vocal balance to compensate for the fact that the vocals are 5 dB too low. And so it's compensated for this by adding the Master Rebalance module first and boosting the vocals up. Now here it's only added 1.4 dB, but if you wanted to pull that up more, you could. And if you go over here and you manually adjust this, this is actually just tied to the Master Rebalance module. So if you pull this up, if you come over here, you'll see that's also pulled it up there. And if you want to bypass it, if you're fine with the vocal balance, you just click here and that will just bypass the vocal balance module. So that is the Assistive Vocal Balance. Again, it's a new AI feature that's baked into the Master Assistant. And essentially what it does is it compares your vocal level to thousands of other songs that Ozone has already analyzed in advance and tries to match that volume level to make sure that your vocals are sitting right in the mix. The last feature I want to show you, like I said, is in the Maximizer module. And they've completely redesigned the Maximizer module. It's got its own Delta button. But the main change that they've made is you can now individually select all of your IRCs, but you can also apply upward compression. So what this does is it allows you to further enhance and maximize the loudness by applying upward compression, especially on the softer passages in your song. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play back this track. This is the instrumental track again. I'm going to set the input gain learn to -11 LUFS. I'm going to set the output level to -1, and I'll turn on true peak. So all you need to do this is just click learn and then play a bit of the track. Okay, so now it's adding a limiter and adding gain to get the loudness level up to 11 LUFS. What I can do at this point is I can add other parameters, but none of these are new except for the upward compressor. And check this out. So what I really love about this is it allows you to add, an extra dB or 2 of gain without having to pull up the actual limiter gain. When you pull this up too much and it hits the ceiling of the limiter, you're just crushing the music. You're losing clarity. And if you use this upward compression along with the clarity module, this is a really great way to maximize the volume of the track while still maintaining clarity and not having to pull up the limiter gain too much. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull this back down. I'm going to pull the gain back down. I'm going to add some clarity in, and then I'm going to relearn the loudness level and then apply some upward compression. So again, you can see that upward compressor sort of pulling up the gain in the lower areas of the waveform and the gaps in between the waveforms and filling that space and maximizing the loudness further. Okay, so those are all of the new features in Ozone 11. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you 3 mastering examples. Off screen, I went through and did a quick master using only Ozone. I haven't used any other plugins other than Ozone on these. And what I'll do is just sort of explain my signal chain and what each of the modules are doing, and then I'll play back a good portion of the track. I'll gain match and then bypass. So you can see what the difference is when it's gain matched, and then I'll bypass without the gain match. So I'm just going to forewarn you that there will be several loud examples coming up throughout this section. And what's so important about gain match is it lowers the output volume to match the input volume so that when you bypass, you're really hearing what Ozone is doing to the signal, not necessarily just hearing something that's louder. So you have to be really careful because you can trick yourself into believing that you're doing more than you really are. Mastering, especially with good mixes, is not that much. I don't want to say it's that much work. It's a lot of work, but it's not a lot of like huge adjustments. So, and that's what we're going to find in, I think, all three of these tracks. So the first one is the electronic track. It's called Eclipse. This is an electronic track that I composed and I'm working on right now. I've started off with the Impact module. And by the way, for all three of these, I started with the Master Assistant, and then I took what the Master Assistant gave me and I tweaked several parameters. So here I'm giving myself a little more impact and punch in the bass and mid-range and top end. For the exciter, what I'm doing here is I'm applying two different exciters. I'm applying one to the transient and one to the sustain. So the sustain is more like a mid-range emphasis, whereas the transients have more of a top-end emphasis. So this is something that's really cool. If I only want the saturation of the exciter to be applied to the transients, this is incredibly helpful. I'll play a little of this and then I'll solo the transient just so you can hear how the transient is being affected by the exciter. So it's really helping to bring out the thwack in the drums and the front end transient and the bass as well. The low end focus module, I'm just using this to add a bit more of a punchy low end to the bottom end. They've also sort of redesigned this module as well, but it's actually just the same plugin with a delta control. But I love low end focus because you can solo just the low end. And you can hear the added punch that's being added to that range. So it's great for bringing out the kick and the bass. The imager, I'm making the low end more mono, widening the mid-range a bit, widening the mid-highs a bit, and widening the high range a little bit. This song already has a lot of width to it, so I didn't really need to go crazy with the imager. Clarity, I'm just adding a bit of clarity just to kind of bring out the top end some more. The dynamic EQ, this is one of the things I really love about using the Master Assistant is it will add these little subtle cuts with the dynamic EQ, and it just helps to tame some of the nasty resonances. And then in the maximizer, I'm using the upward compressor. I'm setting the gain or the loudness level to -10 LUFS. I'm using a -1 output ceiling with true peak. I did the same setting for all three tracks in terms of the gain and the output level. So here I'm using IRC 4. So I'm going to play the track a bit, and then I'm going to bypass it with gain match, and then I'll bypass it without gain match, so you can get an idea of what everything sounds like. love what the clarity module is doing to the pianos. There's a little bit of distortion in the lead in the middle there. I kind of just pulled down the sustain exciter a bit just to kind of tame that down a bit. Maybe a little too much saturation there. Could be also be the soft clip in the limiter. I could turn that off. So that's an electronic example. Next up, let's take a look at Lessons, our sort of electronic rock metal track. I'm going to play the first verse and the first chorus to give you an idea what this sounds like, and then I'll jump over. There's this big, heavy breakdown section. Now, for this one, I started with Ozone using the stem focus on drums. And here, all I'm doing is adding a big boost to the low end and the sort of the high end range. But in addition to that, I'm also turning on the transient sustain mode, and I'm only applying the EQ to the transient of the drums. So this is what's really cool. You can, with this new transient sustain mode, you can only apply effects to the transient of a certain stem, or just the sustain of a certain stem. So if you just want the bass to have more body, you could make the sustain have more body of the bass, or you can really go crazy with this. But just to kind of show you what I'm doing to the drums to thicken them a bit, I'm just going to solo the transient here. And by the way, I should probably jump over to a spot where there's actually drums. So it's taken that, just that part, really just the kick and the snare, and giving it a bit more body and a little more punch there. And then I've added another instance of Ozone where I've applied the rest of my mastering. So in the master rebalance, I pulled up her vocals a little bit. I still felt like they were a little low, so I pulled them up. Clarity module doing its thing. Exciter doing its thing. I like to use the tube and triode circuits for the low and mid range, and then I like to use the tape circuits for the top end. The imagers making the bass more mono, going a little heavier on the mid range, the mid bottom range for the guitars, just to give them some width. For songs with vocals, I try not to move this band up too much, or at least the 1 to 5K range too much, because it can make the vocals lack clarity and focus. And then I'm boosting the top end a bit. Dynamic EQ doing its thing. This is just from the Master Assistant. And then Maximizer set to -10, -1 output. True Peak adding some upward compression and a little soft clip as well. Actually, yeah, maybe I'll keep it in for now, but maybe I'll pull it out.
I keep learning these lessons, though nobody ever knows. Yeah, this life, it keeps testing, then it leaves me alone. And I don't wanna feel like I've ruined my life and it's all been mistakes. But I feel too old to dream anymore and too young to escape. I need a reason to stay. Reason not just fade away. 'Cause if the flame goes out in my soul, I feel dead anyway. I need a reason to stay.
So let's jump over to this breakdown section. She's got some big screams and things like that in here.
Guess it's all a perspective, and it's all in my head. And I'm trying to understand who I am. I'm just trying to find myself, find my inner way, asking just one thing of.
Yeah, so again, don't fool yourself into believing that you're doing a bunch of work here by not bringing in the gain match, because the difference between the input and output is, it's a 10% difference maybe. It's not like a huge difference. It's a little more top end, a little more clarity, a little more transient focus, and we're playing with the width of the song as well. And overall, when you throw anything through a heavy limiter setting, some of these changes you make get lost. And so one of the things I find myself doing quite often is, once I throw the limiter on there, I go through each of the modules and I say, okay, is this module doing anything? I'll bypass an individual module. And if a module doesn't seem like it's really doing that much, I might just get rid of the module because the effect that it's actually having on the end result is not always really noticeable. Okay, let's check out pieces. This one I also added some emphasis, some punch in the drums on an individual separate Ozone plugin. First, I'm not going to go play that like I did the last one, but and then I've got Ozone after it, starting with a master rebalance, bringing up the drums a bit. These are all acoustic drums, and the drums are kind of low in the mix in this song, especially at the end of the song. There's like a bunch of drum fills and stuff, so I really wanted to bring those out and hear, you know, the punch of every single drum hit a bit better. EQ, just a kind of a slight EQ curve. I'm using the exciter as I normally do, triode in the low range, tape in the top end. Imager, same thing, making the bass mono, widening the low mids, widening the high mids a bit, and really widening the top end. Clarity module, just kind of bringing out the top end. Dynamic EQ doing its thing. And then the maximizers at -10, output -1, true peak, quite a bit of upward compression here.
Why are we in pieces?
You know what this needs? This needs low-end focus. Yeah, there you go. So once again, go check out Lexandra. She's on YouTube, on all streaming platforms. Her new song, Lessons, and music video that just came out. Go check out Restless, Lioness, her EP1, which contains this song, Pieces. Both of these tracks I mixed and mastered. I did some production work on Pieces as well. So yeah, go support indie artists and check these very talented ladies out. Okay, so that is Ozone 11. That concludes my overview video on Ozone 11. Again, I'm not a salesman. I'm not going to try to pitch this to you. There's no sales pressure from me. I'll just tell you that I use Ozone pretty much every single day for my work. I love all of the new features. If you're one of those people where you were waiting to upgrade to 10 and you're still on 9, maybe now this is a good time to go from 9 to 11 because the feature set is greater, so I totally get that. If you're already on version 10, like really what I'm probably going to use the most in 11 is the clarity module and then the transient sustain edition. I think on paper it doesn't look like it's such a huge update, but those two features alone, plus the stem focus mode, are just huge improvements that give you even more control over your masters. So again, I use Ozone just about every day for work. I can't recommend it enough, but again, I'm not a salesman. I don't get any kickback from this. It's not sponsored in any way. So if you think this is something you want to add to your workflow, download the trial, try it out for yourself, and form your own opinion. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to see more content like this. As always, thank you so much for the support, and thanks for watching.